The sound broke the silence in the dining room. It wasn't the clatter of cutlery against porcelain plates nor the low conversation about the weather. It was a sharp, cracking sound, a sound that made Elena freeze with her fork halfway to her mouth, the sound of her brother Michael's hand against the face of her 7-year-old daughter Sophia. The slap was so unexpected, so violent in its conception, that the universe seemed to stop for a moment. But what came next was even more deafening. The shocked silence was broken not by a cry of indignation, but by the sound of applause. Slow, deliberate. It was her parents, Robert and Isabel, applauding the act, applauding the correction. At that moment, Elena's world didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. From which city or country are you watching us now? We want to know how far these stories reach. If you believe that no child deserves to be silenced, subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what happened after. The silence was broken. The dining room, once a space of supposed family communion, had turned into an arena of horror. Elena looked at the scene, trying to process the sequence of events. Sophia wasn't crying. Her big brown eyes, which so often got lost in their own universe, were now fixed on some point on the wall, as if trying to detach themselves from reality. The red mark on her cheek was a beacon of pain in the middle of her pale skin. The crying came from Elena, a guttural sound, a sob that tore through her throat. She stood up, the chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor, and ran to her daughter. She wrapped Sophia in her arms, a human shield against the brutality she had just witnessed. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage, her eyes fixed on Michael. He remained seated, impassive, with an expression of duty fulfilled. "I did what you should have done a long time ago, Elena." She was acting up again, waving her hands and making those noises. Someone needed to set some boundaries. She needs to learn to behave like a normal person. Normal? The word came out like poison from Elena's lips. She turned to her parents, looking for any sign of support, of sanity. She found only cold approval in the eyes of Robert, her father. "Finally," he said, his deep voice echoing through the room. "Michael had the courage you lack. Children need discipline. In our day, there was no such thing as autism. It was just a lack of a good spanking." Isabel, her mother, just nodded, adjusting the linen napkin on her lap. "Your father is right, dear. We're trying to help you. This is for Sophia's own good. She needs to fit into the world." Their help was a slap. Their concern was public humiliation. Their love was an act of violence applauded by all. At that moment, Elena understood that she was completely alone. That Sunday dinner, which should have been a moment of togetherness, was the funeral of her former family. She picked up Sophia, the little girl's body stiff with shock, and smelled the strawberry shampoo in her hair. It was the only real thing, the only pure thing in that contaminated environment. "We're leaving," she announced, her voice now firm and sharp. "Don't be dramatic, Elena," her mother scolded. But Elena wasn't listening anymore. She walked toward the door, each step a declaration of war. The outburst would not come with screams, but with the door she would slam behind her. Inside the car, with Sophia safely in her car seat, the silence was heavy. Elena drove aimlessly, tears finally streaming down her face mixing with her smudged makeup. The image of the slap, the sound of the clapping. It wasn't just an attack on her daughter. It was an attack on everything she was as a mother. It was the denial of every sleepless night, every doctor's appointment, every small victory that only she understood the value of. They didn't see the sweet girl who loved to line up her plastic dinosaurs by color. They didn't see the child who could spend hours watching dust particles dance in the sunlight. They only saw the problem, the deviation from the norm that needed to be corrected by force. And Elena's outburst, there in the dark of the car, was a silent oath. They would never have the chance to hurt her daughter again. The loneliness was terrifying, but it was better than the company of monsters disguised as family. The truth is that the slap and the applause were not a bolt from the blue. They were the culmination of a storm that had been brewing for years. Since Sophia's diagnosis at age 3, Elena's family had positioned themselves as an endless source of solutions and advice that only served to undermine her confidence and hurt her spirit. Elena and Sophia's journey was paved with the stones of false hope, thrown by those who should have offered a safe path. Shortly after the diagnosis, her mother, Isabel, arrived at her house with a stack of magazine clippings and articles from dubious blogs. "I read about a miracle diet, Elena. No gluten, no lactose, no sugar. They say it cures autism in weeks. You have to try it. Don't you want your daughter to be cured?" The word cured was like a knife. Sophia didn't have a disease. She had a different way of seeing and feeling the world. But desperate for anything that could make her daughter's life easier, Elena tried. For months, the kitchen became a laboratory for restrictive recipes. The result was not a cure, but a frustrated child and an exhausted mother. Then came the strict discipline phase advocated by her father. Robert, a man who believed that every childhood problem could be solved with a firm voice and timeouts, didn't understand Sophia's meltdowns. "It's a tantrum, she's being manipulative. She's manipulating you, Elena. You need to be tougher. Don't let her sway you. Don't let her hide. Force eye contact." Elena, under pressure, tried to follow the advice. She tried to force Sophia to look her in the eyes during a sensory crisis which only intensified the girl's despair, who began to scratch herself and bang her head lightly against the wall. Elena's heart broke when she realized that by trying to follow her father's advice, she was actually torturing her own daughter. Michael, her brother, had a different approach. Mockery. He called Sophia's narrow interests quirks. When the girl happily recited facts about the solar system, he rolled his eyes and said, "Here comes the little weird encyclopedia." He minimized every challenge. "Oh, come on, Elena, every kid is a little annoying sometimes. You're overprotecting her. Let her figure out the real world." Michael's real world was a place where sensitivity was weakness and difference was a joke. The external pressure was constant. At family gatherings, relatives whispered, "Why doesn't she play with the other kids? Have you tried that pastor who does deliverance prayers?" Every piece of unsolicited advice was a microaggression, an affirmation that she, as a mother, was failing. The false hope they offered was sweet poison. They made her believe that if she tried harder, if she followed the right method, Sophia would become a neurotypical child. They planted the seed of doubt in her heart. Am I the problem? Am I doing everything wrong? The pain this caused was deep, creating a crack in her soul. She felt inadequate, like an imposter. She cried in the shower where no one could hear her, questioning every decision she had ever made. The climax of this psychological torture was the fateful dinner. The slap was not an isolated act by Michael. It was the embodiment of his family's entire philosophy, the belief that Sophia's essence was something to be corrected, suppressed, erased. The hope they sold wasn't that Sophia would be happy, but that she would become someone they could understand and accept, someone who wouldn't embarrass them. And Elena, over the years, bought into that false hope, paying with her peace of mind and ultimately with her daughter's safety. That slap was the final price, and it was too high. To understand the depth of the betrayal, one must look at the cracks in the foundation of that family, where there were no fairy tale villains, only broken people inflicting their own pain on others. The conflict was not just about autism, it was about denial, fear, and legacies of suffering. Robert, the patriarch, didn't applaud violence for pure sadism. He applauded what, in his twisted mind, was the restoration of order. Raised by a strict and emotionally distant military father, Robert learned early on that vulnerability was a flaw. Expressions of emotion were soft, and any deviation from expected behavior was met with physical and verbal punishment. In Sophia, he didn't see his granddaughter. He saw a frightening reflection of the weakness he had spent his entire life trying to suppress in himself. Sophia's need for routine, her sensitivity to sound, her nonverbal communication, all of this was, to him, chaos that needed to be controlled. By applauding the slap, he was, in his mind, endorsing the same bitter medicine that had shaped him. He didn't see that he was perpetuating a cycle of trauma. He genuinely believed that harsh discipline was a form of love, the only one he knew. Isabel, the mother, was a tragic figure of complicity. Her entire life was a performance, a desperate search for social approval. She grew up in a small town where appearances were everything. Isabel's greatest fear was judgment, the whispering of neighbors, the pitying looks of others. Sophia's autism was, for her, a stain on her reputation as a perfect family. Her insistence on miracle diets and fad therapies did not come from a place of malice but from panic. She didn't want to fix Sophia for the girl's sake, but for her own, to silence the voice in her head that screamed, "What will others think?" Her complicity in the slap was her final act of self-preservation, protecting the family's image even if it meant sacrificing her granddaughter's well-being, was a calculation she was willing to make. And Michael, he was a product of his parents, the younger brother who had always lived in the shadow of Robert's expectations and Isabel's social anxiety. He grew up hearing that men don't cry, and that success was measured by the ability to assert oneself. Michael's frustration with Sophia was, in fact, frustration with himself. He saw in Elena a dedication and strength that he lacked. The way she defended her daughter, how she reorganized her entire life around Sophia's needs, was a mirror that reflected his own flaws and selfishness. The slap was an act of power, a desperate attempt to feel in control, to impose his father's order in a situation he did not understand. He was angry not at Sophia, but at the complexity she represented, a complexity that made him feel powerless. He slapped the girl, but the target of his anger was Elena's unconditional love, which he envied and resented. The human conflict was this tangle of unresolved pain. Elena was not fighting monsters but the shadows of her own parents and brother. She was in a terrible dilemma. To protect her daughter, she would have to abandon the only family she knew. The school that didn't understand Sophia's needs was a reflection of society, but the family that judged and abused her was a much deeper wound. There was no clear villain to defeat, just a web of dysfunction, where each person, in their own way, believed they were doing what was right, without realizing that the path they were paving was steeped in cruelty. The door Elena slammed behind her as she left her parents' house was not just the end of a dinner, but the beginning of a lonely and frightening journey. The first few weeks were a blur of pain and isolation. She felt like an astronaut whose safety cable had been cut, floating adrift in a dark void. The family that had once been her safe haven was now the source of her greatest anguish. Her mother's phone calls alternated between pleas to forgive and forget and accusations that she was destroying the family. Elena simply stopped answering. The turning point did not come with a big confrontation or a dramatic revelation. It was silent, gradual, and began in an unexpected place, the waiting room of a new therapist for Sophia. While Sophia was in session, Elena leafed through an old magazine, not really reading. Another mother sitting across from her, a woman named Anne Sophie with tired but kind eyes, noticed her lost gaze. "Tough day?" she asked softly. Normally, Elena would have given an evasive answer, but something in the stranger's voice disarmed her, and the words came out. She told her everything. The story of dinner, the slap, the clapping. She expected a look of pity, perhaps shock. Instead, Anne Sophie nodded slowly, a look of deep understanding on her face. "My father-in-law once said that my son needed more time outdoors to burn off his autism energy," Anne Sophie said with a sad smile. "People who don't live with it don't understand. They think it's a matter of behavior, not neurology. They try to fit a circle into a square, and then blame the circle for not fitting." That conversation was like a glass of water in the desert. For the first time, Elena didn't feel crazy or overreacting. She felt seen. Anne Sophie invited her to an online support group, a forum for parents of children on the spectrum. Hesitantly, Elena joined. What she found there was an oasis, fathers and mothers sharing stories that echoed her own. Stories of absurd advice, of family members who didn't understand, of small victories that only they celebrated. No one offered miracle cures or strict discipline. They offered strategies, empathy, and above all, validation. It was in this group that she learned about alternative communication for when Sophia was nonverbal. It was there that she discovered noise-canceling headphones that could help Sophia in noisy environments. It was there that she read about the importance of creating a sensory sanctuary at home. Help did not come from her blood family, but from a family she chose, united by their shared experience. The quiet turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. Elena was in the living room watching Sophia, who was lying on the rug, spinning the wheels of a toy car, completely absorbed and at peace. The phone rang. It was her mother. This time Elena answered, but put it on speakerphone at a low volume. Isabel's voice sounded tired. "Elena, your father and I were thinking." Maybe we should all go to family therapy. To fix things. Elena looked at Sophia. The girl, oblivious to the conversation, remained in her own world. A world that Elena now understood did not need to be fixed. What needed fixing was the perception of others. With a calmness she didn't know she possessed, Elena replied, "Mom, there's nothing to fix with Sophia. The therapy you need is to understand the harm you've done, and that's a journey you'll have to take alone." She hung up the phone. There was no anger, no tears, just a serene clarity. The turning point wasn't about fighting them, but about stopping needing their approval. It was the discovery that the only opinion that mattered was her daughter's, and that the acceptance she had sought so hard was, all along, in the community of strangers who understood her language. With the fog of her family's toxic influence lifting, Elena began to see the world through a new lens. The focus shifted from the relentless pursuit of normality to the celebration of Sophia's authenticity, and it was on this new ground that small victories began to blossom, like stubborn flowers sprouting from concrete. They weren't big milestones to the outside world, but to Elena and Sophia, they were earthquakes of joy and connection. The first victory was sound. Following the suggestion of her support group, Elena bought a pair of pink noise-canceling headphones for Sophia. The first time the girl wore them was during a trip to the supermarket, a place that had previously been a surefire trigger for a sensory meltdown. With the headphones on, Sophia walked down the aisle holding her mother's hand, her curious eyes observing the colorful packaging instead of clenching in pain from the noise of the sound system and shopping carts. In the middle of the cereal aisle, Sophia stopped, turned to Elena, and, for the first time in that chaotic environment, smiled. A genuine, relaxed smile. To anyone else, it was just a child smiling. To Elena, it was like climbing Mount Everest. Another victory came through touch. Sophia had always had difficulty with physical contact, especially unexpected hugs. Elena, remembering a technique she had read about, began to use deep pressure. Instead of hugging her, she would ask permission. "Sophia, can I give you a bear hug?" And then she would wrap her arms tightly around her, as if wrapping her in a heavy blanket. One evening, after a particularly challenging day at school, Sophia was agitated, rocking back and forth on the couch. Elena approached and sat down on the floor in front of her. It was Sophia who initiated the hug. She extended her arms and said a single word, "Bear." Elena's heart leapt. She wrapped her arms around her daughter and felt her little body relax against hers. That request, that gesture of trust, was worth more than 1,000 verbal declarations of love. Communication also blossomed in unexpected ways. Elena created a feelings board with emojis and pictures. When Sophia couldn't find the words, she could point to the angry face, the sad face, or the happy face. One day, after returning from a schoolmate's birthday party, an event Elena approached with lots of preparation and a clear exit strategy, Sophia went straight to the board. She didn't point to the happy face, as Elena had expected. She pointed to a picture, representing lots of noise, and then to the tired picture. Then she took Elena's hand, led her to the happy face, and squeezed it. The message was clear. It was loud and tiring, but I liked it. It was complex communication, full of nuance, accomplished without a single complete sentence. Elena felt such intense pride that her eyes filled with tears. The greatest of all the small victories happened on a rainy afternoon. They were building a fort out of blankets in the living room. Inside, in the little world they had created surrounded by Christmas lights, Sophia was lining up her dinosaurs. Suddenly she stopped. She picked up her favorite plastic T-Rex and held it out to Elena. "You," she said simply. Then she picked up a Triceratops and placed it next to the T-Rex. "Me?" she added. She looked at Elena, her eyes shining with the yellow light, and said, "Together." The word hung in the air, loaded with meaning. It wasn't just about the plastic dinosaurs. It was about them, together, against the world if necessary. In that blanket fort, Elena wasn't a mother fighting for her autistic daughter. She was just a mother with her daughter, building a world where they belonged. And that was the greatest victory of all. As the days turned into months, the rhythm of Elena and Sophia's life found a new cadence, a softer, more authentic melody. Away from the noise of criticism and unsolicited advice, Elena found space to breathe and, more importantly, to reflect. The searing anger she felt on the night of the slap gave way to a deeper understanding, not of forgiveness but of clarity. She began to look back not only at the trauma, but at her own transformation. Sitting on the porch on a quiet night, watching the stars that had so fascinated Sophia, Elena realized how much she had changed. Before, she was a daughter seeking her parents' approval. Every decision about Sophia's upbringing was filtered through a silent question. What will they think? She craved their validation, their recognition that she was a good mother. The slap didn't just hurt Sophia. It shattered the mirror in which Elena sought her own reflection. And as she picked up the pieces, she didn't try to recreate the old image. She assembled a new mosaic, one that reflected her own strength. She remembered a conversation with her father years earlier, when he said, "You're too soft, Elena. The world will devour you and your daughter." At the time, those words haunted her, made her doubt her own gentle nature. Now she saw the truth. Her softness was actually her greatest strength. It was empathy. It was the ability to hear what wasn't said, to understand the pain behind a crisis, to have the patience to wait for a word to form. The toughness of her father and brother wasn't strength. It was rigidity, a fear of what was different. They were fragile in their armor, while she found resilience in her vulnerability. The most painful, but also the most liberating reflection was about love. She had always believed that her family's love was unconditional, but the incident revealed the truth. Their love came with terms and conditions. They loved the idea of a perfect daughter and granddaughter, not the reality of a child who challenged their notions of normality. Their love was a contract, and Sophia had broken a clause. Elena's love for Sophia, in contrast, was an ocean. It didn't require Sophia to change or fit in. It only asked her to be herself, accepting her daughter as she is with all her complexities and unique beauty. Was not resignation. It was an epiphany. It was the discovery that she didn't need to fix her daughter, but rather fix the world around her, starting with her own little universe. She realized that the revenge she once desired was unnecessary. Her revenge would not be a shouted confrontation, but a life well lived. Her revenge was Sophia's relaxed smile. It was the sound of the girls' laughter echoing through the house. It was the peace they built, together, brick by brick, from the ruins of a broken family relationship. Looking up at the night sky, Elena no longer felt the emptiness of loneliness, but the fullness of her purpose. She was no longer Robert and Isabel's daughter or Michael's sister. She was Sophia's mother, and in that role she found the truest and most powerful version of herself. The transformation was complete. She not only accepted her daughter as she is, she celebrated her, and that celebration was her new north, her compass, her unshakable truth. Life, for Elena and Sophia, did not become a fairy tale. The pain of family betrayal did not magically disappear. It remains like a scar that itches on cold days, a constant reminder of the wound that once existed. There are days when Elena sees a grandfather pushing his granddaughter on the swing at the park and feels a pang of grief for the family she could have had. There are moments when loneliness weighs heavily, especially on holidays and birthdays, when the silence on the phone is louder than any celebration. The truth is that healing is not the absence of pain, but the ability to build a meaningful life despite it. Their hope is not naive. It is not the hope that one day Robert, Isabel, and Michael will show up at their door with a sincere apology and newfound understanding. Elena has learned that you cannot force empathy on closed hearts. Their hope is more real, more tangible. It is in the tools they have acquired. It is in the headphones that give Sophia autonomy over her sensory environment. It's in the communication board that gives voice to her feelings. It's in the support network of other parents who understand the journey without needing explanations. Hope is in the resilience they've built together. The continuity of pain manifests itself in subtle ways. It's Sophia's hesitation around men with loud voices. It's the way Elena tenses up when she hears sudden applause. These are ghosts from the past that still haunt the corners of their lives, but now they have a way to fight them. When Sophia withdraws, Elena doesn't force her to get over it. She validates her. That person spoke loudly, didn't they? That scared you. We're safe here. She names the fear and faces it alongside her daughter, not trying to deny it. The future is not a straight paved road. There will be new challenges, new schools, new social interactions, the complexity of approaching adolescence. But the fundamental difference is that Elena is no longer looking for a map in other people's pockets. She is drawing her own, with Sophia as her co-author. They learn together, stumble together, and get up together. The emotional conclusion of this story is not happily ever after, but strong forever. It is the image of Elena and Sophia on any given afternoon, sitting on the living room floor. Sophia is showing Elena a book about jellyfish, her new passion, explaining with her unique logic how they float and glow in the dark. And Elena is listening, not as a mother teaching, but as a student learning. She learns about the beauty of the depths, about the light that can exist in the darkest places. Their happiness is not the absence of problems, but the overwhelming presence of love and acceptance. The truth is that the family that hurt them gave them an unintended gift, the opportunity to discover that the only family they really needed was each other. And that truth, in itself, is the most powerful and hopeful of all conclusions. Not every family understands, but all true love learns to protect. If this story touched you in any way, if you have ever felt misunderstood or fought for someone's voice to be heard, leave a like, comment your experience, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes sharing a story is the only way to show someone that they are not alone. Someone, somewhere, may need to hear this today.